Welcome aboard, folks. Great to have you here. I got to do that thing at the start of the webinar where I let the class slowly fold their way into the classroom, but I can see lots of names coming through already, so that's absolutely fabulous. Just honoured and delighted to have had the response that we've had to today's information session. Almost 60 people registered to come along and find out about the inner circle today, which is incredibly heartening. So I hope that I can give you all of the information you need. And I've kind of got to remember that. I've kind of got to remember that this is an information session. It's not a show. It's not about entertainment today. It's about the fact that all of you have checked out a little bit of this inner circle concept and that you're thinking, this might be for me, tell me more. So I'm here to make sure that you are told more. Before we get cracking, just a couple of little things. First of all, about you, then about me, then about the program, and then about this webinar. I guess for the you part today, I want to acknowledge that I've had a look at the attendee list. Always trying to make sure that any online delivery we do is very much geared towards the people who are here. And I'm noticing an incredibly eclectic group. So we have people here today who are school principals, we have people who are assistant principals, we have wellbeing coordinators, senior teachers. We have people who I've never heard of before. So welcome to our world. It's great to have you here with us. I have people here who I've known for a really long time. People who, for instance, have thought about stepping into restorative practices, maybe thought about a school culture partnership with us. I've got people here today who are already in school culture partnerships with us and maybe looking to take a key person into the inner circle so that they can kind of carry that responsibility more effectively and perhaps even a little more lightly. And I've got some people who I think will be already coming into the inner circle next year, which is just fabulous. We occasionally set up bespoke inner circle programs. We have 5, for instance, secondary schools in Western Sydney who are coming on together, and we've set up a bespoke program for them. I've seen some people in their attendee list from there who are making use of this this information session today to know a little bit more about what they're walking into as well. So welcome to you all, wherever it is that you're coming from. I think you're on the edge of something really exciting. Then there's me. All right, who am I? I guess the brief CV is that I was a restorative teacher and I loved it because it made me more effective and less stressed. Then I became a restorative school leader who was responsible for the implementation in schools where I was an assistant principal. And then I became a restorative principal. And in one of my roles, which was both my principal roles really, if I'm honest, we had the responsibility of turning around a really tough school, and restorative practices was the linchpin on that turnaround. And then I had the wonderful opportunity to open a large government school as its inaugural principal, and restorative practices was undoubtedly the underpinning of that new culture. And we used it to kind of eliminate a lot of the risks that are associated with starting a new school. Almost the most significant risk you can put in front of a young person in terms of their learning trajectory is to change schools and be the new kid. You spend a fair bit of time anxious and trying to work out the social system. And we had hundreds of the new kids straight up. And we were so proud that we were able to mitigate those risks and that our students were statistically proven to perform academically as well as socially, as well as if they had stayed in their previous school. I think that's awesome. Then there's the program. What is this inner circle thing? Let me give you the metaphor for it first. We talk about circle and the inner circle. Why? Because circles are so fundamental to what practicing restoratively is all about. And we show people through our work, whether you are a primary teacher, whether you are an early childhood leader, all the way through to senior secondary, how circle architecture can change a level of engagement in your classroom that makes teaching more effective and just easier. Circles by nature are continuous, they're strong, and they're without gaps. And so what we think we've developed here in the inner circle is comprehensive. It's without gaps. It's going to make sure that you don't fall off a cliff between your intentions and your implementation. I'll talk to that more in just a moment. And so the whole circle concept to us is really important. And I think that when you are inside a circle, there's something to be said for the tribe that's built when people are in a circle. And that's why I every year bring 12 people together in this space. And so I guess to regress a little bit back to me, I just love this stuff. It is as my 6-year-old niece would point out to me, it's my jam. I just adore this. In fact, a little too much. I can get that sort of look about me that, you know, like, I don't know if anybody in here is a parent, but, you know, when you've got a newborn baby, you love them so much that you just sort of have this moment where it's almost a little bit dangerous. You feel like you just want to squeeze them a little bit tighter, and you know you can't. You've got to be gentle. But I just love this thing so much. I just want to squeeze it. I get a bit like that about leading and talking and mentoring with school leaders who are implementing restorative practices. It just means that much to me. But I've got to remember, and I'm lucky I've got a fabulous team at Real Schools who remind me that you're now not any of those things I mentioned about being a restorative teacher, implementer, leader, principal. I'm the CEO of Real Schools, and they let me know occasionally that, you know, you've got some other things you need to do. And that's why when it comes to the program, I have to limit it. And so an inner circle intake of 12 people that I'm prepared to help comprehensively without gaps has become something that I need to put a gap on. When it comes to the presentation today, I just want you to remember that it is, I know you're coming for information, so there's a transfer of knowledge that has to happen today. Doesn't mean we can't talk. So I'm going to just make sure now I go and open up the chat box so that I've got that somewhere on my screen. There it is. We're good to go. Okay. And if you do have any questions or comments, I'll occasionally pause and you'll see me just go and have a bit of a check and see if there's anything pertinent in there. I'm of absolute certainty that if you ask a question, it won't be just you that's thinking about that question. So please feel free to ask away. And I think what I'll do is if there are questions that appear in there, I'll do the soft finish today where I just scroll through that chat box and hang out and have a chat and perhaps unmute a few people, and we'll have a yarn about the way that the inner circle can work and what potentially you need to know to be able to step into it. All right, let's get cracking, hey. I want to spend just a brief moment here having a quick chat about what it is you'll lead. I don't want to spend much time on this. Our model of working restoratively, we call RP 2.0, and we'll go further into that at another time. But this RP 2.0 piece is really geared around 3 key spheres that you need to lead. If you want restorative practices to actually take root, if you want restorative practices to give you some of the benefits and contribute to strategic objectives, if you want this thing to underpin the culture of your school and to genuinely impact the way people conduct themselves, and this has to be our ambition, there's been too many people who have gone down the route of either looking to treat restorative practices like a program or even looking to implement programs, and you go to so much effort. You do all the mini lessons and murals and online modules and blackline masters, and then you look out your windows and people are not really conducting themselves any different, and it's chiefly because the culture of the school hasn't changed while we implemented that program, and all that effort can be kind of wasted sometimes. And I really feel for teachers when they're compelled to implement programs that don't change what you see when you look out your window. We're stepping up around saying that we think that even these programs can only have a chance when we're implanting them in a culture that supports their implementation. To shift culture, we have to shift language. It's a fundamental driver of any culture. The way that we speak, whether it's even a home culture, a classroom culture, a neighbourhood culture, a national culture, an Indigenous culture, a community culture, a school culture. All of those cultures are driven by the words that are spoken, the way that we speak, and being intentional and deliberate as leaders of that culture, because this is true of our staffs when it comes to a school culture. for so many of the things that are done in a school, the executive has an enormous amount of say. In that if you're going to, as a leader of a school, implement a program around literacy, it pretty much gets done if you make that decision. When it comes to culture, though, the responsibility flattens. We can have intention around the way we're going to speak. We need everyone on board with that. And that's a big deal to get people to change their language. We're also going to have to acknowledge that if we want the conduct of other people to change, we need to change first. And so we need to change the way that we approach conduct. We need to change the way that we approach conflict. We actually need to change some of our classroom pedagogies if we want people to change the way that they interact. And we need to learn those together. And asking a teacher to change their language and their practice, their conduct, that's big. You will see a lot of change management methodologies if you decide to Google change management in an organisation. You'll find very few that are applicable to schools. And the reason for it is that when you are looking to change culture in a school, you have to do it through language and through conduct. And when you're asking teachers to change their language and their conduct, you're asking them to change their personality. We take our words and our practice so personally. And we can actually invoke a really negative response from people sometimes when we ask them to change their language and their conduct, which is why we need to talk about mindset too. And we need to talk a little bit about the things that we think about our practice, about whether, for instance, some of those practices that we've been deploying in the past are genuinely serving us anymore. And how do we create an environment where people can move on? And what that's about is changing the way that people think. So implementing restorative practices, that sounds pretty easy. But we have to be clear that what you're really asking people to do is to change their words, to change their behavior, and to change the way they think. And that is going to take us some intention. And that is why we often find ourselves very excited when we step out. And now, if you're of my vintage at all, then you may be aware of a cartoon called The Simpsons. And there was an episode way back, I think it was in series 1 or 2. So we're talking 30 odd years ago now, I think, where Homer decides that he's going to jump Springfield Gorge on a skateboard to teach his boy Bart a lesson. And he knows that he's going to crash, but then he takes off, and for a brief moment, he thinks, I've got this, I'm going to make it, I'm going to get it right. And I think a lot of people who implement restorative practices get that feeling. Oh, this is going to be a big deal. But then they go and they start sailing and they get a couple of little wins from people. And they think that a couple of little instances go, well, we asked the questions and the kids didn't get into quite so much trouble. And parents seem a little bit happier with this. And I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it. And then something horrible happens. And that is that that was supposed to change slides then. That would have been so neat if it did, wouldn't it? And that is that we crash. And it's because there's a gap here between, as I mentioned before, our intention and our implementation. And from a leadership perspective, particularly when it comes to working through culture and improving culture, we have to understand a better way to move this change, a better way to tackle this change. We have to understand a delicately designed way of helping people step away from deeply entrenched language, practice, and thinking habits. And we have to do it respectfully and supportively, because if we get people offside at the start, we run out of momentum and we just don't get to the other side of Springfield Gorge. So we have to make a decision at this point. If we've bought in on the restorative stuff, and if we really want the benefits of that for our school, how do we gather enough momentum that we can get from one side of the gorge to the other? And really, it's pretty much a matter of saying, I need a better skateboard or a bridge. And I don't care which metaphor you take around that, but I do think you need to understand what you're stepping into. And first of all, that's about understanding that our defaults at the top of this model are incredibly strong. And for us to get across the other side to best practice, we're going to have to build a sturdy defense and a case for people getting there. And for me, that's about understanding, first of all, how you gather collective commitment to this. Now, one of the things that our partner schools will know full well is that when we run our initial day of restorative practices training in a school culture partner school, It's pretty much not until after morning tea that we even mention the word restorative practices. Why? Because we need to answer that question. Why should people do this for you? Why should people go through some of that shame and embarrassment about having to let go some practices that no longer fit within the model that not only the school wants to walk into, but that I'd like to get to? I'd like to have all the benefits of that, but I've got all this stuff that I've been doing. How do we create an environment where it's okay to say, this is worth doing? How do we give them a why that's worth following? And part of the inner circle is about saying, can we actually get clear for ourselves, for our own context, about what's the task look like of painting a picture for other people about a preferred future that's worth walking towards before we hit them with the things they need to change. The second thing is about saying, can we get clear about conflict and conduct improvement? Now, we say behaviour improvement in that model, chiefly because we just want people to know what we're talking about. But when we say behaviour, we often conjure some negative connotations. And what we want to do is point out to people, we actually are not so fussed about all the negative behaviours. We want to improve the conduct. We want to improve the way that everyone connects in a school. And when we've finally got the why in place, we can say, right, we can answer these when questions. When do I do the restorative stuff? When conflict comes about? When poor student choices come about? When we're doing teaching and learning? When we've got something to prepare for? When something goes wrong and we need to respond? When the students arrive at school on a Monday morning, and perhaps when they're leaving on a Friday afternoon? There are ways that we can say, now's my best chance to get restoratively. And as leaders, you have to help other people identify what those opportunities are. And only then can we start to talk about how. And that for me is when restorative practices reaches the instructional model, when you can kind of walk past a classroom as a leader and go, there is some serious restorative stuff going on in there. There's something that I hear a lot of schools say, and that is they wait for something to go wrong and then they do a restorative. And for me, by the time we're getting this far to the right of this model, we're not talking about doing anything restoratively. We're talking about being restorative. And when you know that restorative practices has become something that you not only do when something goes wrong, but you are restorative, I think that's when you can say that you've established a sustainable, and I'm talking sustainable in terms of legacy work for you as a leader. I'm talking about the kind of work that when you leave a school and look back 5 years later is still there, is still happening. It's only then that you can say that you've achieved that. To get that done, we're going to have to talk about discussion and learning opportunities for your staff. How do we actually help them to not only make that decision, but then do all the strategic and tactical things? And what we will do in the inner circle is supply you, resource you to be able to help your people across that journey across 12 months. We're going to have to engage your parents, and we've got an enormous amount of resources we can use to help you to do that as well. We're going to have to look for measurable behavioural shifts. Now, this again sounds like we're talking about students, not so. We're talking about us, staff members. Where will we see some of these circles happening? Where will we see a different approach to conflict? What will this mean in terms of our policies and our work that we need to do and our processes in the school? What does it mean in terms of time out or other behaviour and engagement policies and programs that we might be running in the school? And then we need to have a talk about how this is actually helping your school to achieve its strategic objectives. How are we helping people to become more explicit in their programming? And how is this helping your plans for your entire school be realised? That's the sophistication of change management model that we will need to genuinely implement restorative practices in your school. What does the actual program look like? So when we work together in the inner circle, we have 2 group mentoring sessions per term. So a cohort of 12 people get together and have a bit of a chat, and we do it online. Now, before COVID, that was a really appealing thing, that, oh, cool, I get to jump online with a whole bunch of people all around the country, and you're possibly all here today on your 5th or 6th Zoom meeting of the day. So I get that some of the fascination may have worn off, but we are going to get back into schools, and a lot of that's going to happen in 2022. And you can see here on the screen a group of people who are getting together to not only share their problems, but to share their resources. We're really big on shared documentation in the inner circle. And if one builds something that's useful, then it's useful to all. And so in our group mentoring sessions are primed in that we send out a survey link beforehand, and people are able to list their questions and list their opportunities, the challenges they're trying to overcome that could be, could be shared and could be valuable for other people. And these are incredibly rich conversations that we have 2 times every term. But then you might also want the chance to sit down and talk about your school, and we do that too. So we have what we call personal productivity sessions every semester for you, where we sit down and go, right, what's going on with your school? What are you going to do? How can we resource you to get that going? You can see Kelly of Bayswater Primary School in the top one there in her one-on-one session. You can see Holly and Prue having too good a time from Wodonga Middle Years College in the picture at the bottom. And I think more than anything, this proves that I tend to wear the same jumper every time I'm doing a personal productivity session. But I think it also proves that these conversations can be enjoyable. And I think that when we're working restoratively, we genuinely are working on the stuff that lights us up and that provides us with purpose as school leaders. And that makes this work really cool work to do. Wholly and meaningfully and contextually supported through this entire program. There's also, as you walk through, there's a resourcing element to the inner circle as well. Oh, look at this clown, hey? I probably shouldn't say that about myself, should I? But I'm looking at this picture and it just reminds me of the fact that just a few weeks ago, that shirt gave up completely. So it was a little while ago that we had this picture done. What this is about is the fact that we work also not only on you, but on your school. And so leading a restorative school is a series of podcasts. And every month we send out through from February onwards through to November, we send you a podcast that you can listen to and learn on your drive to school and back every day, or that you can just pop on when you're on the treadmill or going for a walk around the block, or whatever it is that you're doing, the dishes, whatever. You can do a little bit of learning about your school, and you can do a little bit of gap identification, gap analysis about right. Okay, this is an important topic that our school is yet to tackle, and you'll get some key areas that you'll be able to identify through those podcasts. You'll also be resourced in terms of some ebooks, and we send a new ebook that is more about you. It's more about you, the restorative leader, every term. The Restorative Leader is the title of those ebooks, and we talk about how do you in your school do some of the really tricky stuff that will occur in your school while you try to take on a really treacherous implementation. And another thing that we do also is make sure that you get an enormous amount of, as I mentioned before, documents that are shared between you and other people right across the partnership. So 2 of the things that we'd like to do, and this is where there's a little overlap between this and our school culture partnerships, is that we're going to help you build front-facing documentation for your school. We call them our student engagement plans. We often refer to them as sort of in the background in brackets as promises of practice that we put up in the foyer of your school, or you could put in the enrollment pack of your school that says, this is how we do the people stuff here. And to be honest, this is what puts people's minds at ease. And if I get really honest here, this is where restorative practices can become a really valuable marketing tool for your school. When you're able to tell prospective parents with confidence, this is how we do the people stuff in our school, you allay an enormous amount of anxiety. But you're going to need a plan to do that. And at the bottom of that change management model that I showed you previously, you would have remembered those 4 comments around discussion and learning opportunities, school community, in the classrooms, behavioural shifts, and also how we're becoming explicit about our programming and complementary around the school's existing strategic plans. We're going to build a back-of-house action plan for this that we're going to fully resource with you across the 12 months as well. Brett, thank you. Sorry, I just noticed that there, Brett. So you probably did that ages ago. So this is how oblivious I get sometimes. You got Simon as your real schools mentor. Would he be included in the personal productivity sessions? I'm assuming this would be a context, but it would be, Brett. So if you come into the inner circle, you will be working with me. this is mine and I'm keeping it. But what we do with every single of the online deliverables, whether they're the group or whether they're the personal productivity ones, is one, we record them so that you get a private recording of that so that you can revisit it, and we can make sure that Simon has access to that. And the other thing that, you know what, Brett, I've never actually had yet somebody say, can we bring in our expert facilitator and mentor into that conversation? And if on the previous side, on the personal product, on the previous slide, sorry, on the personal productivity ones, you can see, I'll just go back here because I'm allowed to do that kind of stuff. You will see Prue and Holly from Wodonga there. They just said, well, we're going to combine ours and do them together. They're both in the Inner Circle program, but they said we want twice as much. So we're going to have 2 one-hour sessions and make you work twice as hard. And I have a feeling that that's why they're smiling, cheeky buggers that they are. So very big on being flexible enough to meet the contextual needs of your school. And look, to finish things off, I guess I do want to point out that this is now, we have been running the Inner Circle for some time now. I know you can't read that, so just hang on a sec, will you? This is, I'll do the kind of, this is the one I prepared. This is one I prepared earlier that they do on cooking shows. Just wanted to read you the comments. We ask every year our Inner Circle people to tell us what the experience was like, mainly because we're trying to refine it. But Kelly's comments, along with a bunch of other people that you can find on the webpage, is something that I wanted to share with you today. So Kelly's comment is that her experience of the Inner Circle was empowering. I look forward to each group and one-on-one session. I always left our sessions feeling inspired and had learned something new which I could implement immediately. Hearing the stories from other schools was amazing. I've worked in a restorative school most of my career. Through participating in the Inner Circle, I've learned more about working restoratively than I could have imagined. It has given me both the knowledge and confidence to share my work on restorative practices with students, teachers, other leaders, and now our parent community. I've been able to see how my knowledge and implementation of RP across the school has encouraged positive behaviours and a positive school culture. This year, as a school, we have moved from implementing restorative practices to embedding restorative practices. With the support of the Inner Circle and primarily Adam, we have run a series, good on you, Kelly, you'll have to send some wine to Kelly, won't I? We have run a series of internal PL days, created our school's student engagement plan, reflected on and celebrated our many strengths in RP, redesigned our student behaviour plans and processes, refined our induction processes, taken steps to improve our school culture, and collaboratively created a plan for moving positively into 2021. Do it. The knowledge and confidence I have gained through participating in the Inner Circle has exceeded my expectations. It has made me a more restorative person, a better teacher, and a more confident leader. No, I'm not even commenting on that. I'm just really happy with that. I'm just going to let Kelly's words stand alone. As I mentioned, this is one of those programs, often when I'm speaking to people about the partnerships and the services that we run at real schools, I can get a little bit Schindler's List about it. I can get a little bit of just let everyone in for free and we'll take everyone as many as we possibly can. As I mentioned, I can be highly distracted by this program, and so I cap it at 12. There's 12 people that I take into this public program every year, which creates a little bit of urgency. There's an emergency here if you want to get yourself involved. Simon has posted in the chat box the web link that you need to go to. You've probably checked that out already. It's probably in your internet history. And there are 2 things that you can do when you get there. One is that you can you can download the prospectus, which will unpack a little bit more of this detail. I get that, you know, you might be here today in a non-principal position, which means you're not allowed to sign checks. And you might need to print that out, take that back to someone and get your permission to be involved. That's fine. But you can also go to the bottom of that web page and you can sign up immediately. Happy to declare the money. It's $2,750 to be in the Inner Circle for a 12-month period. And if that's something you would like to do, then I would be more than happy to do that with you. Just be aware that we're not taking everybody at this point. And you know what, folks, that's me. The other thing that you can do, one thing that you can do before you go, is that if this is something that you need to have a chat with me one-on-one about, then what I would really encourage you to do is to go to the chat box now And just be aware that you can send a private message in the chat box. So if you click on the little 2 box in there and you change it to my name or just to the presenter, as the case may be, depending on the platform or the software or the laptop that you're using at the moment, if you want to have a chat about that, send me a private message there straight away that says call me. Just say call me and send it directly in there. I'll see it. And what I will do is find your email address from your registration. I'll send you a message and we'll find a way to have a conversation if there's further information that you need. And I reckon that's it, folks. You've been awesome. I've had a real fierce determination recently of finishing all of the presentations that I'm involved in with gratitude. So many of our schools around Australia are doing it tough. Particularly obviously at the moment in Victoria, New South Wales, Melbourne, Sydney, but also Canberra and the ACT, and everybody else who's kind of sitting there with their toes over the edge of the cliff at the moment, wondering what the next step's going to bring. Can I just thank you and congratulate you for the incredible work you're doing? It's so important. You see a lot of stuff around economy and you see a lot of stuff around jobs and you see a lot of stuff around infrastructure that gets called nation building, but what you're doing at the moment is keeping the people of this nation growing, the next generation growing. It's noble and it's valuable work, and I just want to honour that and say that I see you. So thank you very much for continuing to do that work. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to stick around. So if you want to put anything in the chat box, then please do. Here for you. If you don't, then on your merry way. And please use that link that Simon has supplied to get yourself registered. Like I said, only 12 places. Talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye. I'll hang around. I'll hang around if you want, but yeah, I'll stay here until the attendee list completely drops away. Very pleased to hear it, Michael. Glad to hear it, Brett. It'd be good to actually spend some time with you. I've heard so much about the work that you've been doing with Simon. That'll be great. Good to hear, Jay. Let's chat about that if you need to, okay? Drop me a line. We'll work out a time to have a good yarn. Yeah, you too. All right, only 5 faces left in there. So they've either forgotten that the laptop's on or that the webinar's still on, or they've got something to tell me. All right, folks, I'm going to let you off the hook there. Thank you for coming along. Really appreciate it.